"Do not open that door." The warning came too late. Naomi Carter's hand was already resting on the cold brass handle beneath the basement lights of Blackwood Estate. She froze, listening. Behind the old wooden door came a faint sound, almost too soft to hear, followed by silence. Naomi had worked in the mansion long enough to know which rooms were used, which corridors were private, and which doors nobody ever mentioned. This one had never appeared on the household floor plan. It had always been locked. Tonight, however, the lock was slightly turned. Naomi looked down at it, her pulse quickening. She knew she should walk away. She also knew that someone had been here recently. A thin line of dust had been disturbed beneath the door, and a narrow strip of warm light showed through the frame. She reached for the handle. Then she heard footsteps behind her. Naomi turned. At the far end of the corridor stood Adrian Blackwood, the white mafia boss, watching her in complete silence. At 43, Adrian carried the controlled presence of a man accustomed to being obeyed without explanation. He stood 6 feet 2 inches tall, with broad shoulders, a strong build, light olive skin, dark brown hair swept back with approximately 30% natural gray, and a short boxed beard with the same subtle silver. His black luxury suit was perfectly fitted, and the upper buttons of his black shirt were open, revealing part of the permanent black and gray tattoos covering his neck and upper chest. His expression was calm, confident, powerful, but his eyes were fixed on the door. Naomi lowered her hand slightly. "Sir, I can explain." Adrian did not answer immediately. He walked toward her, his footsteps quiet against the stone floor. The closer he came, the heavier the silence became. "What were you doing here?" he finally asked. Naomi swallowed. "I heard something." Adrian looked at the lock. "From inside?" She nodded. "And this door has been locked for as long as I have worked here." Adrian studied her face. Naomi was around 30, with deep black-brown skin, an elegant oval face, high cheekbones, a refined V-shaped jawline, softly rounded chin, large dark brown almond-shaped eyes, long natural eyelashes, graceful eyebrows, full balanced lips, and a long, elegant neck. Her Black Maid uniform was neat, and her natural makeup was subtle, with light eyeliner, warm-toned eyeshadow, carefully shaped brows, and lightly glossy nude lipstick. She looked nervous, but she did not look dishonest. Adrian reached toward the handle, then stopped. "Who told you this door was forbidden?" "No one." That answer made him look at her more carefully. "Then how did you know?" Naomi glanced at the floor. "Because everyone avoids it." Adrian said nothing. For years, he had believed every secret inside Blackwood Estate belonged to someone else. Every locked room had a reason. Every missing record had an explanation. Yet standing in that dim corridor, he suddenly realized something uncomfortable. He had never asked about this door. Not once. Naomi looked back at the lock. "There is something wrong." Adrian's eyes narrowed. "What?" She pointed toward the bottom of the door. "The dust." He followed her gaze. A narrow, clean mark crossed the floor, as if the door had been opened recently. Adrian crouched slightly to examine it without touching anything. His expression changed. The door had not been forgotten. Someone had used it. Recently. He stood again and looked at Naomi. "Open it." Her eyes widened. "Are you sure?" Adrian held her gaze. "You found it." Naomi slowly turned the handle. The lock clicked. The door opened several inches, and a warm, stale breath of air moved into the corridor. Neither of them stepped inside. Beyond the opening was darkness, shelves, and the faint outline of something covered in white cloth. Adrian's calm expression disappeared for the first time that night. Naomi looked at him, then back into the room. On the nearest table sat an old photograph in a silver frame. Adrian recognized the face before he could understand why. He stepped closer. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Close the door." Naomi stared at him. "Why?" Adrian looked at the photograph again. "Because that picture was never supposed to exist." Adrian closed the door slowly, but he did not turn the lock. For several seconds, neither he nor Naomi spoke. The basement seemed to hold its breath around them, filled with the faint hum of old pipes and the dry scent of dust and cedar. Then Adrian stepped back toward the room and looked through the narrow opening again. The silver-framed photograph remained on the table. He could not take his eyes from it. "Do not touch anything," he said quietly. Naomi nodded. They entered together. The room was smaller than Adrian had expected, but every object inside appeared deliberately preserved. Dark wooden shelves covered 2 walls. Old files stood in neat rows. A covered chair rested beneath the window. A brass lamp sat beside the photograph, still connected to an electrical outlet despite the room supposedly being unused for years. Naomi noticed it immediately. Someone has been here. Adrian looked at the lamp. Why? There is no dust on the switch. She pointed toward the table. And the dust around the photograph is different. Adrian followed her gaze. She was right. The room had not been abandoned. It had been maintained. Someone had been coming here quietly, perhaps for years. Adrian moved closer to the photograph without touching it. The image showed him much younger, standing outside a building he recognized instantly. Beside him stood a woman with a warm smile and dark hair pulled back from her face. Adrian's expression hardened with recognition. Who is she? Naomi asked carefully. Adrian remained silent for a moment. My mother. Naomi looked at him. I thought she passed away years ago. She did. His voice was quiet. But this photograph was taken after the date everyone gave me. Naomi studied the picture again. A handwritten date appeared along the bottom edge. Adrian read it twice. The date was 11 months after his mother's supposed final appearance in public. He stepped back. For the first time, uncertainty showed beneath his controlled expression. That is impossible. Naomi did not challenge him. Instead, she looked around the room. A small wooden box sat beneath the table. Its lid was closed, but a thin strip of paper protruded from one side. She pointed toward it. Sir. Adrian followed her gesture. He crouched and carefully pulled the box into the light. No lock, no seal. Inside was a collection of old letters tied together with faded blue ribbon. Adrian picked up the first envelope. His name was written across the front in handwriting he recognized immediately. His mother's handwriting. He opened it slowly. The first line made him stop. Adrian, if you are reading this, then someone has finally opened the door. Naomi watched his face change. The calm authority that had followed him through every room of Blackwood Estate seemed to disappear for a moment. He continued reading silently. The letter mentioned the basement, the photograph, and a person Adrian had never expected to see connected to his family. Naomi did not ask questions. She simply stood beside him, allowing him the silence he needed. Then Adrian reached the final page. His eyes stopped on one sentence. He read it again. Do not trust the man who tells you this room was never used. Adrian lowered the letter. There is something else. Naomi looked at him. He turned the page around. Beneath the final sentence was a name. Victor Hale. Naomi recognized it. Victor was Adrian's longtime advisor, one of the few people trusted with the private operations of the estate. Adrian placed the letter on the table. The discovery was no longer about an old room or a forgotten photograph. Someone had known this secret for years. Someone had kept Adrian from finding it. And if his mother had written the letter deliberately, then the locked door had never been meant to keep people out. It had been meant to keep the truth in. Adrian looked toward the doorway. Naomi. Yes, sir. From this moment on, you tell me everything you notice. She nodded. Adrian looked back at the photograph. Because whoever locked this room did not want me to find what is inside. By sunrise, Adrian had not slept. The letter from his mother remained on the desk in his private study, protected beneath a clear folder, while the photograph from the hidden room rested beside it. Naomi stood quietly near the window, waiting as Adrian reviewed every detail again. The date on the photograph was still impossible. His mother had supposedly disappeared from public life 11 months earlier, yet the image placed her somewhere else, alive and aware, long after everyone had told him the opposite. Adrian finally looked up. There is one question I cannot answer. Naomi waited. Why would my mother leave this letter for me? Naomi glanced toward the photograph. Maybe she knew you would eventually find the room. Adrian considered that. Or maybe she knew someone would prevent me from finding it. He picked up the letter again. The warning about Victor Hale had changed everything. Victor had been part of Adrian's inner circle for years. He had advised him through difficult business decisions, handled sensitive records, and helped manage the estate's private affairs. Yet now his name appeared in a letter written by Adrian's mother before she supposedly disappeared. Adrian opened the estate archives on his computer and searched for Victor's name. Thousands of records appeared. He narrowed the search to the year printed on the photograph. One entry immediately caught his attention. Victor had requested access to the basement renovation plans 11 months after Adrian's mother had supposedly left the estate. Adrian leaned closer. Why would he need these? Naomi walked toward the desk. Maybe the renovation was connected to the room. Adrian opened the attached document. The basement had been scheduled for structural repairs, but the work order showed something unusual. One section had been removed from the final plan. The hidden room did not exist on the official blueprint. Naomi studied the screen. Someone erased it. Adrian nodded. And someone knew enough about the house to do it. He opened another record. A maintenance employee had reported hearing construction work below the basement corridor during the same period. The report had been marked resolved without explanation. Naomi read the final note. Access restricted by management. Adrian looked at her. Who was management? She pointed to the authorization line. Victor Hale. The room fell silent. Adrian closed his eyes briefly. He was not ready to accuse Victor. Not yet. There were too many unanswered questions. Instead, he called the estate administrator and asked for the original maintenance records. While they waited, Naomi returned to the hidden room alone under Adrian's instruction. She carefully examined the shelves without touching anything. A small brass plate caught her attention beneath one of the lower shelves. It carried 3 engraved letters. A.B.M. She returned upstairs and told Adrian. He immediately understood the first 2 letters. Adrian Blackwood. The third was unfamiliar. M, he said quietly. Naomi thought for a moment. Could it stand for your mother? Adrian looked toward the photograph. Maybe. He returned to the archive search and entered the initials together. A single record appeared. It was not a financial document or a property record. It was a private medical appointment from years earlier, filed under a restricted household account. Adrian opened it. The patient's name had been removed, but the date matched the photograph. Beneath it was a note stating that the patient had requested complete privacy. Adrian stared at the screen. His mother had not simply disappeared. Someone had helped her disappear from the records. Naomi saw the realization in his eyes. She may have been hiding, she said. Adrian nodded slowly. Or someone wanted me to believe she was. Before either could say more, Adrian's phone rang. The estate administrator had found the original basement records. There was only one problem. The records showed that someone had accessed the hidden room 3 days earlier. Adrian looked at Naomi. The mystery was no longer buried in the past. Someone was still watching the door. The original basement records arrived just before noon, and Adrian knew from the moment he opened the folder that someone had tried to make the truth disappear. The pages were older than the digital copies stored in the estate system, their edges softened by years of handling, but one detail remained clear. 3 days earlier, someone had accessed the hidden room. No name appeared beside the entry, only an authorization number. Adrian placed the record beside his mother's letter and studied both in silence. Naomi stood across the desk, watching him. Could the number belong to Victor? She asked. Adrian shook his head. Not directly. He turned the page, but it was issued through his office. Naomi looked at the document again. Then he could still know who used it. Adrian nodded. Exactly. He did not want assumptions. He wanted evidence. He called the estate administrator and requested every original access record from the previous month. While they waited, Adrian and Naomi returned to the basement. The corridor looked different now. The same stone walls and low lights remained, but Adrian no longer saw an unused section of his own home. He saw a place someone had deliberately kept outside his knowledge. Naomi stopped near the hidden door. There, Adrian followed her gaze. A faint mark appeared near the brass handle, a small trace of blue paint. Naomi pointed toward it, the same color as the ribbon on the letters. Adrian looked closer. The faded blue was almost invisible against the old brass. He opened the door. Inside, the room seemed unchanged from the previous night. The photograph remained on the table, the letters beside it, the shelves filled with carefully preserved records. Naomi moved toward the lower shelf and noticed that one folder was missing. Adrian checked the space. There were 6 folders yesterday. Naomi nodded. Now there are 5. Adrian looked at the floor. A few loose fibers were caught beneath the shelf, fresh enough to suggest the folder had been removed recently. He did not touch them. Instead, he called Daniel, the estate security manager, and asked him to review the hallway cameras. A few minutes later, Daniel arrived with a tablet. The basement cameras were offline for 12 minutes 3 nights ago, he said. Adrian looked at him. Why? Daniel shook his head. The system recorded a maintenance override. Who approved it? Daniel hesitated before answering. Victor Hale. Adrian's expression remained controlled. Naomi looked toward the shelves. Then someone entered during those 12 minutes. Adrian nodded. Most likely. Daniel opened the archived footage from a camera farther down the corridor. The image was grainy, but a figure could be seen entering the basement at 2:17 in the morning. The person carried a folder under one arm. Their face was outside the camera angle. Naomi leaned closer to the screen. Wait. Daniel paused the footage. Naomi pointed toward the person's hand. A small silver key ring hung from their fingers. Attached to it was a rectangular blue tag. Adrian stared at it. The shape matched the description Naomi had given him earlier. Can you enlarge it? Daniel tried, but the image remained unclear. Then another detail appeared. The figure stopped near the basement entrance and turned slightly toward the camera. Not enough to show a face, but enough to reveal the outline of a distinctive coat. Adrian recognized it. That belongs to Victor. Daniel looked surprised. Naomi remained silent. Adrian did not react with anger. He simply looked at the screen and then at the hidden room. We still do not know if he entered the room. Naomi answered quietly, but someone using his access did. Adrian nodded. That distinction mattered. He refused to accuse a man based on appearances alone. Instead, he returned to the letter. The final sentence suddenly seemed more important than ever. Do not trust the man who tells you this room was never used. Adrian read it again. Then he noticed something beneath the handwriting. A faint indentation in the paper suggested another sheet had once been attached there. Naomi saw it too. There was something underneath. Adrian carefully examined the page. A tiny number had been pressed into the paper. He recognized the format immediately. It was an old estate archive reference. He looked at Naomi. This is not the final clue. She waited. Adrian closed the folder. It is an address. The address hidden inside the old archive reference led Adrian and Naomi to a place neither expected to find connected to Blackwood Estate. It was a small private property nearly 40 miles outside the city, surrounded by tall trees and an aging stone wall. According to the official records, the property had been sold more than 20 years earlier. Yet the archive reference from Adrian's mother's letter was dated only 6 months before her disappearance. Adrian stood beside the driver's door, studying the weathered house in the distance. His dark brown hair was swept back, with approximately 30% natural gray, and his short boxed beard carried the same subtle silver. His luxury black suit remained immaculate, his black shirt open at the upper buttons and revealing part of the fixed black and gray tattoos across his neck and upper chest. Naomi stood beside him, wearing her neat black-made uniform beneath a simple dark coat. Her deep black-brown skin, elegant oval face, high cheekbones, V-shaped jawline, dark almond eyes, long natural lashes, refined eyebrows, and lightly glossy nude lips remained unmistakable. She looked toward the house. Are you sure this place belongs to your family? Adrian shook his head. That is what I am trying to determine. They approached the front entrance. The door was unlocked. Inside, the house smelled of old wood and dust, but it did not feel abandoned. A fresh cup sat on a small table near the hallway. Naomi noticed it immediately. Someone has been here. Adrian looked at the cup. Recently. He moved through the quiet rooms while Naomi followed several steps behind. The house contained very little furniture, but one room was filled with old boxes and documents. Adrian opened the first box. Inside were property records, medical documents, and photographs. Naomi carefully examined the photographs without touching them. Then she stopped. Sir. Adrian turned. She pointed toward a photograph lying beneath several papers. It showed his mother standing outside the same house. Beside her stood a younger Victor Hale. Adrian stared at the image. The photograph was dated 2 years before his mother's disappearance. Victor knew this place, Naomi said. Adrian nodded slowly. Apparently. He opened another folder. This one contained handwritten notes describing meetings between his mother and several people whose names Adrian recognized from old estate records. One name appeared repeatedly. Victor Hale. But there was another name beside it. Eleanor Brooks. Naomi looked at Adrian. Who is Eleanor Brooks? Adrian's expression changed. My mother's closest friend. Where is she now? Adrian searched his memory. I was told she moved away after my mother's death. Naomi noticed the wording. You were told. Adrian looked at her. The distinction mattered. He had spent years accepting information because it came from people he trusted. Now every old explanation seemed incomplete. He opened the final folder. Inside was a letter addressed to Eleanor. The handwriting belonged to his mother. Adrian read it silently. The letter mentioned the basement room, the hidden archive, and a decision that had apparently been made years earlier. Then he reached the final paragraph. If Adrian ever finds the room, tell him the truth before Victor does. Adrian lowered the letter. Naomi could see that the words had unsettled him. She expected you to find it. Yes. And she expected Victor to know. Adrian nodded. Outside, a vehicle passed slowly along the distant road. Both of them looked toward the window. The sound faded. Adrian returned his attention to the documents. One final paper remained inside the folder. It was a property transfer record. The property had not been sold 20 years ago. It had been transferred into a private trust controlled by an anonymous administrator. The trust had one beneficiary, Adrian Blackwood. Naomi looked at him in surprise. Then this house was never really sold. Adrian shook his head. No, he folded the document carefully. Someone wanted me to believe it was. Naomi looked toward the hallway. Could Victor have known? Adrian answered after a pause. He could have. Then he noticed a fresh mark on the dusty floor near the back room. Someone had recently moved a heavy box. Adrian and Naomi exchanged a look. The mystery was no longer confined to an old basement or a forgotten letter. Someone had preserved this house for years, and someone was still returning to it. Adrian walked toward the back room. Naomi followed. On the wall beside the doorway hung a small silver-framed photograph. This time, Adrian recognized the person standing beside his mother immediately. It was Eleanor Brooks. But the woman was not alone. In the background stood a young Adrian, watching them from several feet away. He had no memory of that day. Adrian stared at the image. I was there. Naomi looked at him. Then why do you not remember? Adrian's answer came quietly. Because. Someone made sure I would not. The photograph changed the meaning of everything. Adrian remained still in the quiet hallway, staring at his younger self standing beside his mother and Eleanor Brooks, a moment he had been told never happened. Naomi watched him carefully, understanding that some discoveries needed silence before they needed answers. Adrian finally turned the photograph over. On the back, written in his mother's handwriting, were 4 words, "The second door remembers." He read them twice. Second door? Naomi asked. Adrian nodded. There was never supposed to be another one. They searched the back room together. The walls were covered with old shelves, but one section looked different. Naomi noticed a narrow line between 2 wooden panels. She gently pointed toward it. Adrian examined the seam and found a small brass plate hidden beneath layers of dust. The same 3 initials were engraved there. A.B.M. He remembered the mark from the basement. It is connected, he said. Naomi looked at the photograph again. Then your mother expected you to find this too. Adrian pressed the brass plate. Nothing happened. Naomi studied the surrounding wood and noticed a small indentation shaped like the edge of a key. Adrian reached into his jacket and removed the old key ring found in the basement records. One key carried a faded blue tag. He inserted it into the hidden lock. A quiet click sounded inside the wall. The panel opened slowly, revealing a narrow archive room behind it. Unlike the first hidden room, this space had been carefully maintained. Shelves held labeled boxes, sealed envelopes, and old household records. A small desk stood beneath a window. On it rested a single notebook. Adrian approached it, but stopped before touching it. This was prepared for me. Naomi nodded. Then read it. He opened the notebook. The first pages described his childhood, his mother's concerns, and the people she trusted. The entries became more personal as the years progressed. Then Adrian found a page dated shortly before his mother's disappearance. It explained that she had discovered financial irregularities inside the family trust and feared that someone close to her would manipulate Adrian after she was gone. She had created the hidden archive as protection, not against an outside enemy, but against misinformation. Adrian continued reading. One sentence made him pause. If Adrian is ever told that I left willingly, he must ask who benefited from that story. Naomi looked at him. Who benefited? Adrian turned another page. A list of names appeared. Victor Hale was at the top. Eleanor Brooks was second. Several others followed. But beside Victor's name was a handwritten note. He knows where the original records are. Adrian closed the notebook briefly. He was no longer looking at a mystery from his childhood. He was looking at a carefully preserved truth that had waited years for someone to find it. Naomi noticed another envelope beneath the notebook. It was addressed simply to Adrian. He opened it. Inside was a recent photograph of the basement door. The picture had been taken only days earlier. On the back was a message. Someone has returned. Adrian looked at Naomi. The person who entered the basement did not come for the old records. Naomi understood immediately. They came because they knew you had found the door. Adrian nodded. Then he noticed a second photograph beneath the first. It showed the hallway outside the hidden room. In the corner stood a figure wearing the same distinctive coat seen in the security footage. Adrian did not need to see the person's face. He recognized the coat. Victor Hale. But beneath the photograph was one final note from his mother. Do not confront him with what you know. Let him believe the door is still closed. Adrian slowly folded the note. His expression became calm again, but something had changed behind his eyes. He looked at Naomi. You were the first person to notice the door. She nodded. Then you are the reason we know the truth exists, he said. Naomi remained quiet. Adrian returned the photograph to the envelope. Now we find out how much of the truth is still hidden. By the time the sun set over Blackwood Estate, Adrian had made one decision. Victor Hale could not know that the hidden archive had been opened. The old house settled into its evening. Silence as Adrian returned to his study, carrying nothing from the secret room except a single copied page. Naomi stood nearby, watching him place the page inside an ordinary folder. What happens now? She asked. Adrian looked toward the windows. We wait. Naomi understood. If Victor believed the secret remained hidden, he might reveal what Adrian could never discover through direct questions. Adrian asked Naomi to continue her normal duties throughout the evening. Nothing about her routine could change. She returned to the household rooms, carrying the same quiet presence she always had, but now every detail mattered. At 7:15, she noticed Victor entering the main library. He carried a leather portfolio and spoke briefly with the estate administrator before closing the door behind him. Naomi continued down the hallway. 10 minutes later, she noticed something else. Victor's usual route through the house had changed. Instead of going toward the office wing, he walked toward the basement corridor. Naomi did not follow. She returned to Adrian's study and told him exactly what she had seen. Adrian listened without interrupting. Did he see you? He asked. No, good. Adrian checked the time. Now we know he is looking for something. They waited several minutes before reviewing the security system. The basement camera showed Victor entering the corridor alone. He stopped near the locked door and looked around. Then he removed a key from his pocket. Adrian watched the screen carefully. Victor opened the door. Naomi looked at Adrian. He has a key. Adrian nodded. Victor entered the hidden room and remained inside for less than 3 minutes. When he came out, he carried a folder. Adrian paused the recording. That folder was not there yesterday. Naomi looked closely at the screen. The missing folder. Adrian nodded. He did not immediately confront Victor. Instead, he asked the security manager to preserve the recording and quietly document every access point Victor had used that week. Then Adrian returned to the letter from his mother. One sentence continued to trouble him. Let him believe the door is still closed. Now he understood why. The goal was not merely to catch Victor entering the room. Adrian needed to know what Victor was searching for and why. The following morning, Adrian invited Victor to breakfast in the private dining room. The conversation appeared ordinary. They discussed estate expenses, upcoming meetings, and several routine matters. Victor remained composed. Is there anything unusual happening at the estate? Adrian asked casually. Victor shook his head. Nothing that I know of. Adrian held his gaze for a moment. The basement. Victor paused almost imperceptibly. The basement. Yes. I have been thinking about renovating that area. Victor smiled. There is nothing useful down there. Adrian said nothing. Those 5 words were enough. Nothing useful down there. Exactly the kind of answer his mother's letter had warned him about. Victor had not asked what Adrian meant by the basement. He had not asked which part Adrian intended to renovate. He already knew. After breakfast, Adrian met Naomi privately. He lied. Naomi nodded. What will you do? Adrian looked at the folder containing the evidence. Nothing yet. He opened it and showed her a photograph from the security footage. Victor stood outside the hidden room with the missing folder in his hand. Naomi studied the image. Then she noticed something Adrian had overlooked. Look at his other hand. Adrian enlarged the image. Victor was holding a small blue tag, the same kind attached to the key found in the basement. Naomi's observation connected another piece of the mystery. Victor had not simply known about the room. He had controlled access to it. Adrian leaned back, silent. Then Naomi noticed a second detail. A small silver emblem was attached to Victor's coat. It matched the initials engraved inside the hidden archive. Adrian looked at her. For the first time, the entire pattern began to emerge. His mother had not hidden the truth from him. She had hidden it from Victor. And now Victor was searching for whatever remained. Adrian closed the folder. "We let him keep looking." Naomi asked, "Why?" Adrian's expression remained calm. "Because the next thing he finds may tell us exactly what he has been hiding." Adrian was right too. Wait. The next clue appeared before midnight. Victor returned to the basement alone, carrying the same leather portfolio he had taken from the hidden room earlier that evening. Adrian watched from his study while Naomi stood beside him, both following the security feed in silence. Victor entered the corridor, checked the hallway, and unlocked the hidden door with the blue-tagged key. He disappeared inside. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Naomi noticed something on the screen. "He is not looking at the shelves." Adrian leaned closer. "What is he doing?" Victor had moved toward the old wooden desk at the far end of the room. He opened a narrow drawer that Adrian had never noticed before. From it, he removed a small envelope. Naomi looked at Adrian. He knew exactly where it was. Adrian nodded slowly. The envelope was not part of the old archive. It had been placed there recently. Victor opened it, read the contents, and remained still for several seconds. Then he placed a second document inside the envelope and returned it to the drawer. Adrian immediately asked the security manager to preserve the recording. He did not want Victor to know he had been observed. When Victor finally left the basement, he locked the door behind him and walked away without looking back. Adrian waited until the corridor was empty. Then he and Naomi went downstairs. The hidden room looked exactly as it had before, but the drawer was slightly open. Adrian examined it without disturbing the contents. Inside was the envelope Victor had handled. Naomi noticed a second envelope beneath it. "There are two." Adrian carefully removed the first envelope and opened it. The document inside was a copy of an old trust agreement. It showed that a large portion of Adrian's family assets had once been placed under temporary control during his mother's final year. The administrator listed on the document was Victor Hale. Adrian read the agreement twice. "He had authority," Naomi said quietly. "Temporary authority," Adrian corrected. "But the authority was never supposed to continue." Naomi looked at the dates. The temporary arrangement had been extended 3 times without Adrian's knowledge. Each extension carried a signature that appeared to belong to his mother. But the final signature was different. Adrian studied it carefully. "This is not her handwriting." Naomi looked closer. "Then someone forged it." Adrian did not answer. He opened the second envelope. Inside was a letter from Eleanor Brooks. It explained that Adrian's mother had discovered the unauthorized extensions and planned to remove Victor from the trust. But before she could do so, she became seriously ill and feared that the records would disappear. Eleanor had helped create the hidden rooms and preserve copies of the original documents. The final line was dated only weeks before Adrian's mother disappeared from public life. "If Victor ever learns that Adrian has found the archive, he will destroy the remaining records." Adrian lowered the letter. Naomi watched him carefully. "That is why he came back." Adrian nodded. "He is not protecting the past." He looked at the documents. "He is protecting what the past can prove." Suddenly, footsteps echoed from the corridor outside. Adrian and Naomi looked toward the door. The footsteps stopped. Silence followed. Adrian closed the folder and waited. A shadow passed beneath the doorway, then disappeared. Neither of them moved. After several seconds, Adrian quietly stepped toward the hall and looked outside. No one was there, but on the floor sat a small object. A blue key tag. Naomi picked it up carefully and turned it over. Written on the back were 3 words. "Ask about Eleanor." Adrian stared at the message. Eleanor had been described as his mother's closest friend, but the hidden documents suggested she had known far more than anyone had admitted. Adrian returned to the room and looked at the photograph of his mother and Eleanor. For the first time, he noticed something in the background. A child stood beside the doorway. It was him, and beside him stood Victor. Adrian's expression changed. He had remembered being told that Victor first entered the family years later. The photograph proved otherwise. Victor had known Adrian's mother before Adrian's earliest memory. Naomi looked at him. "Then the story you were given about your childhood was not true." Adrian remained silent. The room seemed colder. He finally closed the archive box. "No," he said quietly. And now I know where to look for the first lie. The first lie was buried in a record Adrian had never been allowed to see. Before returning to Blackwood Estate, he asked the estate administrator for every document connected to his childhood, his mother's disappearance, and the original family trust. By early morning, a sealed archive had arrived in his study. Naomi stood nearby as Adrian opened the first folder. Inside were school records, medical appointments, travel documents, and old household reports. Everything appeared ordinary until Adrian found a page dated 20 years earlier. It listed the names of everyone authorized to make decisions concerning him while he was still a minor. His mother's name appeared first. Eleanor Brooks appeared second. Victor Hale appeared third. Adrian stared at the page. Victor had been involved in his life far earlier than anyone had told him. Naomi noticed another document beneath it. Look at the date. Adrian lifted the page. It was a guardianship authorization signed only days after the photograph from the country house. The signature beside his mother's name looked similar to hers, but not identical. Adrian compared it with an authentic letter. The difference was obvious. It was forged, he said quietly. Naomi nodded. Then someone wanted control over your decisions before you were old enough to understand what was happening. Adrian turned another page. A handwritten note from Eleanor explained that Adrian's mother had become concerned about the people managing the family trust. She had intended to correct the records and place everything under Adrian's protection when he became an adult. But the process had never been completed. Instead, Victor's temporary authority had quietly continued. Adrian looked at Naomi. All these years, I thought my mother abandoned the family because she was sick. Naomi answered gently. Maybe that was never the whole story. Adrian continued reading. The final document contained a statement from Eleanor, written shortly before Adrian's mother disappeared. It confirmed that Adrian's mother had planned to meet Eleanor at the country property and recover the original trust records. She never arrived. Eleanor had waited, then discovered that the records were already gone. The statement ended with a simple sentence. If Adrian ever finds the archive, he deserves the truth. Adrian closed his eyes for a moment. The mystery had finally reached its center. His mother had not created the hidden rooms to conceal wrongdoing. She had created them to preserve evidence. Victor had not protected Adrian's family. He had protected his own position. Naomi placed the blue key tag on the desk. What about Eleanor? She asked. Adrian picked up the telephone and requested a current address. The answer came 20 minutes later. Eleanor Brooks was alive and living less than 50 miles away. Adrian and Naomi left that morning. When they arrived, Eleanor opened the door herself. She was older now, but Adrian recognized her from the photographs. She looked at him for several seconds before her eyes filled with tears. You found the room, she said. Adrian nodded. My mother left it for me. Eleanor stepped aside and invited them in. She confirmed everything the documents suggested. Adrian's mother had discovered that Victor was extending his authority over the family trust without proper approval. She had prepared evidence, but before she could present it, she became ill and feared that the records would be taken. Eleanor had helped preserve copies in the hidden archive. She had remained silent because she believed speaking without proof would only place the evidence at greater risk. Adrian listened without interrupting. When Eleanor finished, he looked at Naomi. The Black Maid who had once been almost invisible inside his mansion had become the person who led him to the truth. Adrian returned to Blackwood Estate that evening with the original documents secured and every record preserved. Victor was invited to the study. Adrian placed the evidence on the desk, one document at a time. Victor's confidence disappeared as the truth became impossible to dismiss. There was no shouting, no spectacle, only silence. Adrian finally said, "You told me the room was never used." Victor lowered his eyes. Adrian looked toward Naomi. She found what you wanted hidden. Then he closed the folder. And from this day forward, the truth will never be locked away again. The basement door remained open that night, allowing warm light to reach the corridor. Naomi stood beside Adrian in silence. For years, he had believed power meant knowing everything. Now he understood something very different. Sometimes the person everyone overlooks is the one who sees the truth first.